The Incredible Hulk. Kicking things off with everybody's favourite green raging monster, the Hulk. The adventures of Bruce Banner dealing with his alter ego, the Incredible Hulk. This was the Hulk's third animated outing. It is set at a time when Banner is constantly on the run from the military lead led by Thunderbolt Ross. This situation is made all the more complicated by the fact that Banner is in a relationship with Thunderbolt's daughter Betty, which creates a very complicated but interesting dynamic. He also has to deal with the leader, a villain whom is determined to take the Hulk's powers and fuse it into him. With all of this going on against him, Banner unfortunately gets people close to him in danger's way, including Betty and his cousin Jennifer. During an attack by Doctor Doom, who seeks to capture the Hulk for his own nefarious needs, Jennifer is injured and is given a blood transfusion from Bruce, which leads to her transformation as She-Hulk. On top of Bruce's enemy encounters, he also comes across other Marvel characters making appearances throughout the show's run, including Iron Man, War Machine, Thor, Ghost Rider, Doctor Strange, and The Thing from the Fantastic Four, adding to the richness of the show and making it somewhat of a shared universe with all these other characters. The show had a serious edge to it during its first run. This, however, changed during the second season with She-Hulk being added to the show. There was also a second Hulk, Grey Hulk, who was a less savage version to the regular Hulk. This shift in tone changed the feel of the show as it was slightly campy and light-hearted. Thunderbolt Ross ends up even giving up his pursuit of the Hulk, and the show ended after 2 seasons and went out on something of a very low-key note, which was disappointing. The first season is what makes the show worth watching, and the complete tonal shift for the second season looking back after all these years is still a little baffling. There was the Marvel Action Hour, which was a 2-hour, 1-hour block consisting of episodes of the Fantastic Four and Iron Man, and Stan Lee would have a quick intro before the shows began. We'll start with the Fantastic Four. Now, this version was the third animated iteration of Marvel's First Family. It made its debut this year on September 24th, running until February 24th, 1996. I remember watching a couple of episodes around the mid-90s when it was running in syndication, but it wasn't until the 2000s, when I was older, that I paid more attention to the show. It follows the adventures of Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, and Ben Grimm, the Thing. It ran for 2 seasons at 26 episodes, and it was a tale of 2 seasons. The first season was very cartoony, with cornball dialogue, and the animation was very subpar. The second season, however, had a more mature vibe with better storytelling and action, and slightly better animation. Most of the episodes in the first season were fairly accurate reinterpretations of the classic 1960s Fantastic Four comic book stories by both Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Some of the stories that were adapted was the arrival of Galactus and his herald, the Silver Surfer, in the 2-parter The Silver Surfer and the Coming of Galactus. Now, Season 2, as I stated earlier, was a vast improvement with its look and its storytelling, with John Byrne's 1980s run in the comics the main source of inspiration, along with artist John Buscema's drawings heavily inspiring the look for Season 2. I do apologise if I've butchered John's surname. Along with Iron Man, it followed a trend of running for only 2 seasons, with the first season's look and feel feeling vastly inferior to the second season run. There was a host of notable guest appearances from other Marvel characters in the show, including Daredevil, the Inhumans, the Hulk, Black Panther, and Ghost Rider. Now, a topic to get into on a later date on the channel, but a decent outing for the Fantastic Four. Iron Man. Like the Fantastic Four, Iron Man was a tale of 2 seasons. Now, its first season was mostly self-contained episodes which had a Saturday morning kid-like vibe with subpar animation and over-the-top cartoon voice acting. The second season had better animation, better stories and arcs with a much darker vibe as compared to season 1. The first season was mostly original stories and no comic book adaptations. However, in the comic books, Iron Man did leave the Avengers and form his own group, Forceworks, which was adapted for this first season. In Season 2, the show focused more on Iron Man himself, with Forceworks being written out of the show in the first episode, and War Machine Rhodey hanging up his armour after he develops a phobia. There are ongoing story arcs unlike the first season, which make the stories a bit more engaging. I have done a feature on Iron Man, so if you want to go check that out, please do. Iron Man does cross over with another Marvel figure in the show, the Hulk, appearing in the episode Hulkbuster. Iron Man does return the favour, and he appears in an episode of the first season of The Incredible Hulk. The late great James Avery appeared in season 1 of the show, voicing War Machine Rhodey. Due to poor ratings, the show was cancelled after 2 seasons after a run of just 26 episodes. In the grand scheme of Marvel animated shows, both this show and the Fantastic Four are not in the upper echelon of great Marvel shows. Personally, both second seasons of these shows were marked improvements, and had they continued, I think the shows may have gotten better. Overall, the Marvel Action Era was a product of its time. The shows don't hold up as well, but they can be a great trip down memory lane sometimes. Spider-Man TAS. My personal favourite Spider-Man cartoon of all time. Making its debut in November of 1994 and running for 5 seasons at 65 episodes. This story did very well to adapt story arcs and characters from the comics and interpret them in this series. Unlike Spectacular Spider-Man, this show sees Peter enroll at Empire State University and try to balance his study life with being Spider-Man and taking care of his Aunt May, whilst navigating his friendship with best friend Harry Osborn and dealing with his relationship issues with Felicia Hardy and of course Mary Jane. Spider-Man can be credited with having one of the most interesting rogue galleries in superhero history. This show is stacked full of some of the most memorable villains, including the Kingpin, the Hobgoblin, the Chameleon, Alistair Smythe, Rhino, Scorpion, Carnage, Venom, and arguably his greatest foe, the Green Goblin. The show took time to build the background story arcs for a good number of these villains, and it added to the overall ambience of the show. There was also an abundance of guest stars from the Marvel Universe. Some memorable story arcs in this series include the Neogenetic Nightmare, which slowly saw Pete transform into a man-spider. There was the Secret Wars adaptation when the Beyonder selects Spider-Man and gets him to build a team with other Marvel heroes and take on some of the most dangerous foes in the Marvel Universe. There is also the final arc of Multiple Spider-Man, which saw Ben Reilly make an appearance on the show. Overall, the series did very well to not just take and adapt stories from the comic books, but also make it unique enough for them to stand out in their own right, as opposed to just being straight up copies. There was definitely more room, I feel, for more episodes, but the run ended after 65 episodes. But it was supposedly due to disagreements between producer Avi Arad and network head Margaret Loesch. However, this has now been since debunked, as producer John Sempler said it was simply due to funding issues, as their producer New World had gone out of business and there was no company able to do the funding. Regardless, it was an excellent showcase and is one of the most memorable animated runs for Spider-Man. The X-Men. The X-Men were amongst Marvel's most successful characters within the comic books, and this show helped solidify them as a top-tier act. Released on October 31st, 1992, this show was a hit, as it followed the adventures of a group of mutants who are formed and are sworn to protect the human race who fear and despise them. This show was a great advert for fighting against bigotry and intolerance. It told great stories without feeling too preachy or beliefs being shoved in your face. The show is heavily influenced by the early 1990 Jim Lee X-Men comic run, as the look of the characters is taken directly from that comic book series. The lineup consists of Cyclops, Gambit, Rogue, Storm, Jubilee, Jean Grey, Beast, Professor Charles Xavier aka Professor X, and Wolverine. A primarily ensemble cast, as there were specific episodes dedicated to a single character giving them their own personal story arcs. As well as dealing with the hatred of humanity towards them, the X-Men also had to deal with various villains with superpowers. You had Mr. Sinister, who had a fascination with Cyclops and Jean Grey, as he wanted their DNA to help him build an army of superpowered mutants. There was Sabretooth, Wolverine's arch nemesis. There was the Friends of Humanity led by Graydon Creed, the son of Sabretooth, the first and most powerful mutant on Earth, who proved to be one of their most formidable enemies, which culminated in a 4-part story Beyond Good and Evil, The Mighty Apocalypse. There was also Magneto, Professor X's best friend turned enemy, who were on opposing sides when it came to dealing with humanity. The show did extremely well to adapt comic book story arcs like Days of Future Past, in which there is an assassination attempt on Senator Kelly, with Gambit being their prime suspect, and in actuality, it is another X-Men foe in the form of Mystique. The Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas, which saw Jean become one with the entity known as the Phoenix in order to stop the threat of Terrant Dequen from the Shi'ar Empire. This later leads to the Phoenix itself becoming corrupted and turning evil in the process. The sagas are brilliantly adapted from the comics and set a standard of a faithful adaptation, unlike the movies. Like all Marvel shows, there were appearances from other Marvel alum. In its prime, X-Men garnered very high ratings for a Saturday morning cartoon show, reaching approximately 23 million households. There can be no doubting the success of the show, as it led to future Fox movies and all of the animated adaptations. To this day, it is still considered the best X-Men animated series. X-Men the Animated Series, a certified classic animated superhero show.